Am I audible? Over the web? Yeah, good. Fine. Yesterday we have looked into very basic of image creation, but there are some other things which will slightly pop up at the later point of time. So we have discussed about entry point, right? We have discussed about the command, okay? And whenever in the run statements, whenever you are trying to pass anything after the image name, will override what? CMD or entry point? CMD, yes. Can entry point be overridden? The answer is no, till 6 months ago. But now there is an option, okay? But do many people know about it? No. So that's why I'm very careful when I tell about these statements. Those are the new command line arguments that are being added to the Docker run statement, okay? So if someone asks this question, can whatever you have written in the entry point, can it be overridden? The answer of that is yes. There is a way which Docker has added newly. In Docker run, there is an argument which is called as hyphen hyphen entry point, and then you write whatever you want. Please be specific about your answer, right? So basically, when you, if you remember me on the day one of my class when I started command line, I said that get into the Docker documentation of it. Docker run. Are you seeing something called as entry point? This was not there earlier. This was not there earlier in the Docker older versions, but this is the new stuff that has been added. So this stuff always changes, and it is very difficult for you to remember everything, right? So please go through these options. For example, if someone says that I want you to run a Docker container, I want you to run a Docker container, and I want to give Docker container a memory of 2 GB of RAM, because we don't know how much is the memory that is being allocated, right? So for that, there is an option which is called as hyphen hyphen memory. Okay, remember we have learned about C groups. Yes, we have discussed about C groups. Anything which you want to change with respect to C groups, you will have some C group options also over here. Those are internal commands. Generally, whenever you are creating Dockers for your enterprise applications, for general needs, you will not change it. But there are options. There are options. And there are hell lot of options. Okay, and there are certain options which consist of something called as Windows only. So don't worry about that. We have not spoken about Windows containers. I'm very specific about Linux containers. Windows containers, let us discuss during the next 2 weeks, where we learn PowerShell and PowerShell DSC, because at that moment I want to cover whatever is necessary for Windows. But as of now, my focus is on Linux stuff, right? So if you are seeing over here, you will have whole lot of stuff, right? For example, I want to run a container where I want to give 4 virtual CPUs. Are you seeing an option called as hyphen hyphen CPUs? Yes. So that these are the things. So these things can never be taught. So please go through the command line of whatever command which you are running. For example, I'm quite sure that you are running Docker run now. You are using Docker build now, and you are running Docker exec now. And I would like you to at least go through all of the command line references, right? In నేను చెప్పిన that interview లో అడగరు, మీరు ఎక్కువ వాడరు కూడా. But in corner scenarios, you should at least know what is happening. And remember, when Docker 19 comes in, there might be some more command line options, right? Fine. And remember, in yesterday we have written something called as maintainer. Okay, that is going to be deprecated very soon. What do I mean by deprecated? That will not be supported by Docker, right? So that is replaced by label. That is replaced by label. You have to write label, okay, and in that other equals to your mail ID, organization equal to whatever it is. So new things always pop up. New things are always better for whatever it is, because whenever you are writing about a maintainer, you can write only about one thing. But the concept of label has came because whenever, let us assume I am a quality thought and I'm building some Docker containers, I want enough publicity, right? So why do I want to write just a maintainer's name? I want to write the organization's name. I want to write lots of details about it. So that's why label will help you to write more than one thing, right? Fine. So please always refer this, always refer this, right? Okay. Yeah. And one last thing with respect to instructions, we have added and copied files, we have discussed about it, right? Now let us assume that you want to add a folder. So it would be saying add folder in your local system, some path on your container, right? So let us assume your folder path is something like this. Let me get into CMD. uh, let us use Linux terminology itself. I don't want to use Windows stuff. C drive temp make dir. Okay, let us call it as uh, apps. Okay, make dir app slash temp make dir app slash src make dir app slash bin. Okay, now you look at our apps folder. What are the things which we have? Bin, src and temp. And let us assume that within that there are files. Now you want to add this folder. You want to add this folder. Wonderful, simple. So this folder you will be adding by saying docker, okay, or add instruction path of this and wherever you want it inside your container. But there is one catch over here. He doesn't want temp folder. He wants bin and src, but not temp. And this folder is not created by you, so you cannot delete temp. Is there any workaround? The answer for that is docker ignore file. The answer for this is docker ignore file. So what you would do is, typically, I'm just elaborating on this. So basically you will create a docker file over here, right? I should have done just touch. Okay, docker file, and then you will be creating one more file called as docker ignore. And in this docker ignore file, you will be saying that I am not interested in, okay, or you can be very specific about your path. What is it? App slash temp this, or any file within this, you can also use this. So whatever you have written in this docker ignore file will be ignored while you are adding or copying statements. If it is for any other case, this doesn't make any sense. Docker ignore files comes into play when you are adding or copying files, but you want to ignore some parts of it, right? Remember, this doesn't apply to any other stuff. For example, I am doing run. Can I ignore something? Delete it. For running, there is no ignore. There is only ignore for add or copy. And remember, docker ignore file has to be in the same folder where you have docker file. Docker ignore has to be in the same folder where you have docker file. These are the requirements. For example, if you want to do this, you will do this stuff. Making sense, right? Okay, these are generally not being used very heavily, but few people do it. Few people do it because of various requirements, because they build the code and there are hell lot of folders and you don't want all. And basically, generally, whenever you see, now I am running docker from a Linux machine which I have created and all of that. But when you go into the complete pipeline automation, this stuff is done by Jenkins. Whatever build commands you are doing, docker build -t, we are executing these commands, right? We will tell Jenkins to do it. Whenever Jenkins does it, we cannot have a perfect environment, because those are always generated files. So Jenkins compiles your code, Jenkins executes the test cases, Jenkins will package your application, and then Jenkins will call docker. So there are a hell lot of folders in Jenkins. So in those cases, it becomes very important. But whenever you are running from CLI on your machine, you will not have this case at all. because you will have full permissions, you can delete the stuff, right? But eventually we want this to be automated, all of the commands which we are trying to do, right? So for that case, it is very important for us to understand this. Good. Now the most, I'll say, second most important area. One was building image, the first job, we are good, okay? And the next stuff which we want is to deal about containers which are running. Let us assume that I am running a container called as Tomcat, and that container has failed somehow. That container has failed somehow. You start a new container. New container, will it have some data of your older application? No, it will have altogether a new set of data. So there is a chance that there are some folders in your applications which are still required for your application to be working. Okay, so here I would try to speak about, yesterday in the cloud class I have spoken about it. There are two kinds of applications: stateless applications and stateful applications. So stateless application doesn't use your local container at all. Whenever it wants to store anything, it will use the external container, something like database, okay, or probably a MongoDB or cache server. So in your container, you are not storing anything. So whenever a new container comes, there is no problem because local container doesn't have any storage, right? So let us assume this is a scenario. The square box is a container. We have two containers with which our application works. All right. Let us assume that this is Tomcat container and this is MySQL container. All right. Will we have databases in containers? Answer is yes or no, both. You can have it. Whether you would like to have it or not is your architect's decision. Right? Is it possible? The answer is yes. Now, let us assume that in this we have deployed a var file yesterday, right? So let us assume our var file is something like ecom.var, something like this. This is the application which your company is building. Now, whenever someone makes a request to it, okay, there are two things that could happen. Some of the data it can store inside the container's local storage. All right, and major data it might store into the MySQL. So whatever data that is going into MySQL, you don't have any problem, because tomorrow when we bring up exactly the similar container, we will not have an issue, because even that container can speak with MySQL. So this is an advantage of having stateless, because whether it is the old container or whether it is a new container, both do not store anything locally. Everything is stored on an external container. Whenever you want data, you will go there. Simple. The problem solved. But if the case is this, the container stores something in its local storage. In var logs file, it is showing something which is required for your application to work. Now, that is present, that is not something which is present while creating, that is present while application is executing. And application install chesinapudu first a folder undadu. While the application is being used by your customers, this folder is generated. Now that folder is present over here but not here. So whenever that old container which you are using is killed and a new container comes up, your application suddenly starts behaving differently, because the new container doesn't know where that folder structure is, that has been killed. We have lost all of the data. How to solve this? This is a problem with stateful applications. This is a problem with stateful applications. So now what is the definition of stateful? Stateful is an application that uses local storage of whatever environment it is working for storing some state data or some, when I say state data, let us simplify it, for some compute logic. So the logic could be as simple as user count on your website. నా వెబ్సైట్కి ఎంతమంది విజిట్ అయ్యారు అన్నది ఆ సిస్టంలో టెక్స్ట్ ఫైల్లో పెట్టుకుంటుంది. How many people have visited my website? It is storing in a text file. When new container comes up, there is no text file and suddenly the count becomes 0. Is 0 the correct number? No. That is the problem with stateful applications. If that 0 was stored in, if that count was stored in database, we didn't have any issue. It was a stateless application. But the problem is, let us assume your company has been, don't want to change this code, but you have this kind of a problem. So how to deal with these kind of problems? Right? Yeah, making sense? Okay. Now For these kind of things, we need to work with hard disks, or we need to work with storage. We need to work with storage concept of Docker. And Docker storage concept is called as volume. Is called as volume. So in Docker, whatever you see, basically anything which is related to hard disk is a volume. Right? So let us log in into our containers and let us see what are the different things which we can do with respect to these volumes. All right. So volume is a storage area which can help you out. Now, to solve these kind of conditions, how can we use volumes? It might take some time, 10 to 15 minutes for me to explain how to do that. All right. So let me quickly log in into AWS or my Docker machine. Right. Not just the scenario which I'm trying to tell. For example, you want to monitor your logs which the containers are generating. So installing Elasticsearch or agent inside the container might prove very costly to you, because container itself is supposed to be thin, and you are installing agents there, which is not a good idea. So what we do is we try to somehow get the data which is present inside logs which are present inside the container on your parent system. And from your on your parent system, you will have an agent which will basically push the data to a whatever log server it is. Let it be syslog, let it be logstash, let it be anything. All right. So how to do all of that stuff? So for that, we will be working with something called as Docker volume. Docker volume. Fine. Let me get into Docker machine. Okay. Okay. Docker supports altogether a different command for volume management. So what is that as Docker volume ls? We have never known that we were working on volumes, but there are already volumes. There are already volumes. These are the volumes that are being created by the containers which we have run. Okay. So let me just do Docker volume. So we can create the volume, you can inspect the volume, you can remove, prune is all unused volumes. All right. RM is remove the volume. Fine. Now Docker volume ls. Now are you seeing any volume here? Yes. Copy this and just say Docker volume inspect and copy the ID of your volume. So are you using any path? Var lib. Okay. Some of you had questions, right? Where does Docker store all of this and all of that, right? So copy this. Let me say ls. Okay. If you remember, we have ran the Jenkins application, right? And for the people who know Jenkins, what is it? It is Jenkins home directory. So Jenkins container we have run long back, but the store of it, the data of it is still remaining. Right? So your container is no longer available, but the data that your container has generated is still available. Right? So this is what you can do with basically volumes. Your volumes, whenever you create a volume, what would happen is it would basically be stored on some path of your system. Stored on some path of your system, and generally those paths are var lib docker volumes, and then you would have a volume ID, and then basically there you would have underscore data. So let me do this. Let me not get into all of that. Oh, okay. So whenever we did docker volume ls, we got 4 volumes, right? So these are those 4 volumes, right? So what is this volume? Volume is nothing but some mount on your container. What is a mount? For the people who know Linux, I'm quite sure you understand what a mount is. But for the people who don't know Linux, what is a mount? Mount is some drive area, right? Some area on your what do you say, on your system. For example, I'm quite sure how many of you have seen something like P drive, Z drive in your companies. P, Z, okay, T, okay, those are all mounts. But those are network mounts. That's a different story. But they are mounts, all right? So basically, whenever you try to use something, if you try to copy from your local system, it will be available in the container, and whenever you do something in the container, it will be available onto your local machine. All right. Now, by looking at this approach, let us just look at this image again. For whatever data which it is generating locally, what I will do is, let us assume that these two are running in the same machine. Okay. Whatever star data which is generating, what I will do is, I will store as a volume. Yes. So when I store as a volume, whatever is generated over here is present on my local system. And later on this new container, it will try to reuse the same thing. Right? Is it making sense now? Do we have some sort of a solution? The volume that is generated on the container can be stored somewhere on your local system. Later on, you will use the same thing to basically on your new container. So even if the new container comes, it generates some more data, we are not losing anything, because everything eventually is present on your machine where your Docker is installed. Now, your question might be, now going forward, tomorrow we might not be dealing with one system, we might be dealing with multiple systems. Then how do you solve it? Then we will go for network mounts. Rather than mounting onto your local system, we will mount onto some network drive, NAS or SAN kind of storages, right? In Amazon world, we can use EFS for this, right? So that's the whole point. So if this is possible, we can take it to network, and this is made possible by a concept called as volumes. Okay. So now what I would do is, okay, let us see what are the different images which I have over here. First, let me see containers. Okay, I want to get rid of these containers. So docker rm minus f dollar minus a minus k. Good. Now let me look at docker images. Right, I have these many images. Now let me try to run a Tomcat image, or let me try to run what was the stuff which we have built yesterday. We have built something, GOL. Yeah. So now I would run something like this: docker run, what do you call, GOL. Okay. Since it uses ports, we were saying minus p. Okay, I'll use some other ports: 8700 colon 88, whatever it is, any port for that matter, 970. Okay. Now I want to run this in a detached mode. Fine. Simple. Now, what is the Tomcat's home directory over here? Do you remember that? User local Tomcat. Now I want a backup of that. I want the backup of that on my system. So what I would do is, I would add one more stuff where I would say minus v, and then I would say user local Tomcat. Okay. And now let me give a name to this container. I will give a name called as volume underscore one. That is the name of my container which I want to give. Let us see what happens. So what is that I have given? I have used -v command, and then I have given some folder path which I want as a volume. Oh, we don't have latest image, right? It is GOL colon 1.0 or 1.1. Yeah, whatever it is. 1.0 or 1.1 is what we have built yesterday, right? So now let me do Docker volume ls, and extra volume added. We had 4. Now we have, how many we have? We have 6. All right. Okay. Now let me go into Docker. I want to get inside my container. How can I do that? Docker exec -it. Okay. And then what is the name of the container? Volume underscore one, and then /bin. Okay. So let me now use df -h. Okay. So are you using any mapping over here? These are all the mounts. So we have a root mount, we have a dev mount, we have all of this, right? And then basically, okay, there is something called as dev/xvda1 and all of that. But we are not seeing whatever we want. We are not seeing whatever we want. Now let me try to create the same container with a different approach now. So control PQ so that I don't want to kill this container, and then I'll run the same stuff. Okay. But this time let me not use user local tomcat. Or else I can. Okay. So Docker volume ls. Okay. Docker inspect. Generally we are giving inspect for volume, right? Now let us see. I have not used Docker volume inspect. I have used Docker inspect. What is the name of my container? Volume underscore one. Please use this whenever you want to know any additional details about your container. Docker inspect name of your container. Similarly, Docker inspect name of your image or name of your container ID, image ID, container ID. You can use that. Now let us see what is the information which you would get. So you get a lot of information. This will not be about storage. This will be about everything in your container. It will consist of your network. Okay, these are all network settings, and then there is a working dir. He says that there is a volume. Okay. Now if you come over here, go to the top, it is giving you all the environment variables which we have displayed. Okay. Go still to the top, and then there is something called as source. Are you seeing this? Yeah. Oh, sorry, I've used Control C. I should not have done that. I should use Shift Insert. Yeah. Let me copy this and get inside this folder. The volume mapping which we have created works something like this. So sorry, I have to use. Let me use it's fine. So what is this folder? What are the contents of this? Okay. Let me do one more thing. Yesterday, what was the name of the var which we have copied? Are you seeing anything with that name? So is this not our home directory or the directory where we have done our work? So don't we want to preserve this? Yes. Okay. But there was only one problem with this approach. Whatever data which we have generated has gone into some folder which was present for which for the path of it I had to run docker inspect name of the container, copy the path of it and get inside it. ఇది కొంచెం ఇబ్బందిగా ఉంది కదా. So this looks quite tricky. So what I would do is, let us look into this. Okay, make dir tomcat. I've created a directory called as tomcat, right? And basically within this tomcat I'll copy the contents of underscore data to where, to home, home, Ubuntu and tomcat. But the problem is I'm copying directories, so it is better or it is required that I use recursive. If it was a file, you don't need all of this. So what is that I'm trying to do? Whatever data is in the volume, I'm trying to copy into some local storage of mine. Okay. Now let me get into cd tomcat. Am I seeing some content? Yes. Okay. So there is something called as my underscore data. It's fine with me. I'm absolutely fine with that. So in tomcat we have something called as underscore data, and then in underscore data you have whatever is required for the tomcat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this for my next container. I'm going to use this for my next container. See what would be my command. So docker run. Yeah, this is quite obvious. -d detached mode. I have also used -v, but in the -v in the last case I have given user local tomcat which was path in the inside the container. Now see what I would do. I would say that I want to create a mapping between my home directory Ubuntu tomcat, and inside the tomcat I have underscore data. Okay, this I want to map with user local tomcat. Okay, and rest of the things is whatever it is 8080 colon 8080. Okay, is there any other thing that is required? I don't think so. So gol colon 1.0. I think we wanted to give name, right? So I'll give hyphen name volume underscore 2. The first thing which I've done as a wrong is it is docker. Now what was the difference between this statement and that statement? In the earlier statement I have not created mapping. I said that I wanted volume. So whenever you want volumes, you will just say docker run -v and you will give path inside your container. Done. So whatever is inside your container will be backed up onto your system in var lib docker folder. But now you are creating a two-way sync. You are trying to tell that in my system, in my local system, there is a folder called as home Ubuntu, right? Tomcat underscore data. So whatever is inside that, okay, create a mount of that in your user local tomcat. In your user local tomcat. So let us see what would happen. All right, done. Now docker exec volume underscore 2. I want to get inside this. So -it slash bin slash bash. Okay, so I don't see anything over here, but now let us just get into this. Make dir temp. I've created a directory called as file exists. So make dir test. Yeah, control pq. Now let me get into my folder, cd underscore data. Are you seeing test folder? Yes or no? Yeah. So I have created the folder inside the container and I'm seeing the sync over here immediately. The same thing was happening in the earlier case, but now this is in your readable path. This is in the path where you know what has to be done. Now see what I would do. Okay. So let me get into something like Jenkins war. Okay, good. I'm not worried about how do I download it. I'm worried about the path of it. So let me copy this. Yeah. See what I would do. CD web apps, and here I do wget. Okay. Okay. First I need to get into web apps. I'm not being patient these days. So fine. Now I'll do wget. Where is that I'm copying this file in? In my local hard disk. Right? But whenever you copy a file in your web apps folder, when Tomcat is running, what would happen? It will deploy an application, right? So inside my folder in my system, I have copied some war file, right? Now let me go inside the Docker, copy this path, okay, colon 8080. We know that this will take us to the Tomcat page. Yeah, and inside this we know that when we go to the game of life, okay, it will take some time and it will launch the page, whatever it is. All right. Now let me try to do this stuff. Okay, container might have killed. Let us see. Docker ps volume to running. Good. Oh yes. So it has failed for whatever reason it is. But am I able to copy something? Yeah. Game of life. So what is the advantage now? I have copy of whatever is being done in the container on my local system, right? And it is a two-way sync. Whether something happens on the container, I'm able to get the data. Whether I am able to do it, I'll be getting the same thing. Now let us basically try to do one more stuff. So Docker, I'm not interested in volume underscore one. Okay. Similarly, I don't want to remove it. So what I would do is Docker stop. So I'm stopping the container, which is volume underscore one. So Docker is stopped. Now what I do is, yeah, not this 80 volume underscore 3. I've changed even the version. This is a new version of the tag, but I'm reusing my old volume. All right. So now you just tell me when I run this, what would happen? Two containers, user local Tomcat. Is it not from same place? Yes or no? How many of you have doubts on this? పర్లేదు నేర్చుకోవడానికి వచ్చింది. How many of you didn't understood what I have done? Okay. So let me reiterate this again. What is that I have done? I have said that in my home Ubuntu folder, there is something called as underscore data. So this is where I have all of my stuff. Now then what I have done is I have created the container, and while creating the container I have used something which looks like this: -v, okay, home, Ubuntu, or I will start from minus data. I'm lazy, guys. So you can underscore data. You just assume that it is from that path. Underscore data map to user local tomcat. Okay, and this container is my wall underscore 2. Now what is that I'm trying to do? I'm trying to create one more container, and this container is volume underscore 3. Now this, are we clear that this and this are same? ఇక్కడ దీంట్లో ఏమైనా డౌట్లు ఉన్నాయా? So underscore data and whatever is present in your user local tomcat is the same folder I am speaking about. In this, do we have any confusions? Right. Now what is that I have done over here? I have said I will be using -v underscore data colon user local tomcat. Now what is happening? For volume 2, what is the source of user local tomcat? This. Do you agree to this? For volume 3, what is the source? Again the same thing. So what is happening? Two containers are using some folder which is actually the same folder. All right? Yes. Now what would happen? You are having one area and then you are trying to use that area into multiple systems. So am I able to share one single folder into multiple containers? Right? This is the interview question, and this is very famous certification question. How can you share one network mount into multiple containers? So for that you have to use something like this. So you'll use -v. First you create folder in your system, and then you will create a mount. All right. Now to simplify this, since this user local tomcat looks complicated, what I would do is, okay, let us assume that I kill all of them again. So docker rm -f dollar, okay. So let me go ahead and create one simple folder called as make dir code. Simple. Yes. And then inside the code I am creating directories like touch code slash, okay, main dot c. Simple. I have a directory, and within that directory I have one file, and that file doesn't have anything. Yeah. Now let me create this docker run, okay, -v home, right, ubuntu code being mapped to, right, what is the directory which will map? What is the temp directory? Where temp directory of Linux enti? emp. Yes, thanks. I don't remember this. Okay, నాకు రిమెంబర్ చేయకపోయినా ఎవరు ఇంటర్వ్యూలో అడగరు, ఎందుకంటే నేను ఇంటర్వ్యూకి వెళ్తలా, మీకు తప్పదు కదా. రైట్, ఫైన్. సో gol colon 1.0. I'm not interested in accessing that application. So did you got what I'm trying to do? I am creating a mapping between a folder which is called as code to something called as var/temp. All right, and I'm putting the stuff over there. Now let us see what happens. I could have done -d miss. Okay, sorry for this. So I should not have done this. What? Okay, so I'll be running -d because I don't want to run it in attached mode. I don't want to see all of these logs. And just for our convenience, let us give name. So I'll call the name as 1. Okay, so I have a container called as one, where I am mapping basically my code folder to some temp folder. Now let me get inside this container, or let me execute docker exec, right? What is the container's name? One. And what is the command? ls slash var slash temp. What is that you are seeing? Main.c. Now touch, okay, src or touch code slash, okay. I'll be creating one more file which I would call it as main1.c. So my code folder has how many files now? And where I'm making that change? Inside the container or in my system? Okay. Now let me execute the same command whatever I have executed inside the container. This is execution inside the container, right? So is this two-way sync? Yeah. Now let me do this. Touch slash var slash temp slash main2 dot c. Where am I executing this? Inside the container or in my machine? Inside the container, because I am using docker exec. Make sense? All right. Now let me execute ls code slash. Are you seeing three files? So is it two-way sync? Whether I do it in my system, it is getting updated in the container. When I am running it inside the container, then I am able to see it basically inside on my physical machine. Now what I want to do is, I want to mount the same folder onto other container. So now what is the sync between a container called as one and my Linux machine? Now I'll be creating a container called as two, where I'll be mounting the same drive again. So let me do this. Docker run -d, because we'll not forget it, -v home slash ubuntu slash code, again to var slash temp hyphen name. ఇందాక రాసుకున్నారుగా ఇదే కమాండ్, ఏం లేదు, 1 తీసి 2 పెట్టాను అంతే. రైట్, gol:1.0. fine. Now docker exec, I'm executing the command inside the container, and on the container which is called as 2 ls slash var slash tm. Am I getting the same content? Yes. Now I'll get inside the container docker exec 1 touch slash var slash temp slash main3 dot. So what is it I've done? I've created a file inside the container which is 1. Now let me execute the ls on the container 2. Am I seeing the same file over here? So how is this sync happening? Basically, whenever we store anything in the container, it is not storing inside the container, it is storing on your physical machine's file system, which is being mounted onto two containers. So whenever you want a same folder to be synced across multiple containers, you follow this approach. How is this approach useful? You can ask me this question. Why is this approach required at all? So Apache website, we all know that, right? Apache. And in Apache, if you want to change the home page, what is the folder which you will get into? var www html, and in that you will have something called as index.html. Now let us, I assume that I have 10 containers which run Apache, and now to change the home page, I have to change 10 different, I have to get into 10 different containers, and then I have to do the stuff. But if I have done this mapping, how many times do I need to change it? One place. Change it in your local system, all the 10 containers will be updated with that. So if you are looking out for some solutions which are like this approach comes in very handy. Okay, so this is especially used for Jenkins. Okay, so let us assume that you want to have a load balance or a highly available Jenkins. High available Jenkins. Jenkins stores everything in home directory. Just like Tomcat is storing everything in user local Tomcat, Jenkins stores something in one particular folder. Create a mapping of that onto your system, right? And then give it to all the other containers which are going to start. So that even though the container which is running Jenkins is failed, nothing is going to happen because your data is still available. Your data is still available. And you can, I have used only one volume mapping, -v and ఒకసారి రాశాను, మీరు 2-3 సార్లు కూడా రాసుకోవచ్చు. You can say that -v home ubuntu code :var temp మళ్ళీ -v home ubuntu src to some other folder on your container. So there is no limit of how many v's you can use, much like your port mapping. You can use one port forwarding or you can use multiple port forwardings. You can basically do this. Make sense, right? So now in container, for the people who had doubts yesterday saying that what will happen to my data, so is your data being lost now? Yeah, but remember, don't try to back up complete root folder. That is nonsense. Cheyochu, it is technically possible, but why do you want to do that? Take only important folders of your applications. Your applications might have binary folder, log folder. Try to create a volume mapping for all of that. Is this good? Yes, but there is one more thing which we can do with our stuff is, this depends on the person who is using it, right? It is intelligence of the person who uses this command to do this. So while writing the container itself, can I do something? While building my image itself, can I do something so that my image has a volume? Can I do that? The answer for that is yes. The answer for that is yes. So how can I do that is, let me get inside the images, and I'm not sure what was the folder where we have written game of life. Yeah, game of life, vi docker file. Okay, I'll go over here and then I'll simply say volume, okay, slash user slash local slash tomcat. Now what would happen when you write this statement is, whenever a container is created, a volume is automatically created. It is not for two-way sync. It is for the, whenever we, without knowing volumes, whenever we logged in into this machine, whenever we did docker volume ls, we have seen some list of volumes, right? So these are the volumes which are explicitly you are writing inside the image saying that I want this volume to be created. I want this volume to be created. Right? Make sense? Right? If you want your image to automatically have a volume, you will do that. If you want your image to share some folder content of your system, you will use -v and then you will be using mapping. All right, so now let me do this. Docker build, we know this, -t. Okay, so gol, let me use this as a latest now, because I'm not going to create this image anymore. All right, and my stuff is over here. Good. Now let me do docker inspect gol. This is what it is. This is your image inspection data. Are you seeing anything called as volume user local tomcat? So your image itself has a definition for this volume. If you don't write that volume statement, you will not have this definition. Making sense? So volume is an essential entity for you to take backup. In Docker, how do you take backup? Using volumes. Using volumes. Any hard disk related utility, you will be using this. Make sense? Is it clear now? We have one more important concept to discuss about hard disk. But are we clear with this point? Right? Okay. Now let me look at the questions over the web. I'm not sure. So what is the more efficiency which you are looking out at? You will not do it, Jenkins will do it for you. That's what I would call as efficiency. Whenever the code has been changed, docker build -t gol colon whatever is the tag, that is done by automatically. So that is the efficiency which your companies are looking at, right? Okay. Can I get into the Docker machine without logging in AWS console? So how can you do that? It is not possible because my parent machine. So AWS is just a machine where I have Linux, right? Let us assume that your desktop itself is a Linux machine, right? You cannot get inside the container without getting into your laptop, right? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Can we attach stopped Jenkins volume to your container? You cannot basically do that, but while creating, while doing run statement, if you want, you can use something called as mount. If you want, you can use something called as mount. There is a mount command. Please have a look at that. All right. While creating an errors like creating the images, Docker build exactly requires one argument. You might have forgotten dot, because the only important argument for Docker is Docker build -tag, and then you have to tell where your Docker file is. See whether you have given the Docker files path or not. You might have missed that. Yes. Volume contains the data inside the application installed container, not entire container. No, we will not do entire container. Entire container is nonsense, right? Because entire container consists of some Linux folders. Why do you want to take a backup of that? So generally, whenever you take backups, you will take backups which are required for your application, not for the system. Is it not possible? Definitely possible. Does it make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. Why do you want what is in var, lib, whatever it is? So why do you want to get inside the folders which your application has nothing to do? Just get inside the data, because container is all about application. So even the logs will be worried only about our application, right? Which will have highest precedence in case of mounted local or container having some data? Which one will be replaced? Local will not do anything ideally. Say imagine that it is your production scenario, and on your production server you have two containers which are using the same folder. Okay, so on the folder you will generally be not writing any data. You will generally be not writing any data. Okay, so it is not, basically I will not call it as precedence. So let us assume that you have a folder in your application, folder in your system, and there are three applications which write data to it. So you might have locking issues. That's it. It is just like sharing a folder with three different applications. For example, I am quite sure that you might have seen Excel. You put Excel in the shared drive, and if someone opens it, a lock file will be created, and when someone else tries to open it, it will say that it is in someone is using it. I would be able to open it only in read only mode. Something like that would happen. Okay, so there is nothing called as much about concurrency over here. It is the same thing like what concurrency is applied to your hard disk. Jenkins was not downloaded due to permission event. Yeah, whatever it is. So my intention was not to download Jenkins, but my intention was to prove that you can also copy some data inside that. It's fine. While creating build, I am getting error like. So it is not nothing to do with your Windows 8. Okay. By the way, Docker build command will not fail with Windows 8, but I would recommend don't use Windows 8. Either come back to Windows 7 or go to Windows 10. 8 is a very dangerous place to stay. Most of your DevOps tools don't work there. So if you are on Windows, either come down or go up. Right. I think I've done this, Lakshmi, right? Because I've said that code part, and I've taken the two folders and then mounted it. So if you have any confusion, try it once and then I'll try to do it. I don't have a problem reiterating it, but just give it a try. What was the whole idea? One folder on my machine, and I want to put it in some folders on my containers. So whenever containers change, my local folder is updated, right? So yesterday there was one question about how do I send logs to the satellite server or syslog server. This is how you do it. All right, fine. Can we add mount points while the container is running? Generally we don't do that, but if you want to do it, it is still possible, but you have to do within the container, not outside container. You have to use that df capabilities. How you mount the linux, how you mount the linux volumes, it is possible, right? Is it okay or a good practice to use EFS to sync Linux box to Docker containers for high availability? It is absolutely okay. All right, there is no problem with using EFS. So for the people who are looking out for what is EFS, EFS is Amazon's Elastic File System, which is like a network share between multiple Linux systems. Right? Okay. How exactly Docker is used in CI in Jenkins? Okay. So I said that, right? After building the code, packaging the code, you will be building the Docker image also. You will be building the Docker image and pushing it to some registry, so that every build which you do have one Docker image. So for example, you are doing 2 builds per day. So let us assume today's date is, what is today's date? 22. So you will have image versions like 22.1 and 22.2. So whoever wants to take your application which was built in the morning, they will run something like Docker run whatever your image name was colon 22.1, and they will be getting that application inside the stuff. Right? Make sense? Right. Fine. Let me see if I can handle this or not. In Yes, please go ahead. Hmm. It is the same folder size. You can use your S commands, LNS, because the folder size doesn't really make any difference over here. So if I would put it this way, these days any new technologies are really not worried about storage spaces. You take any technology, right? Earlier we used to do that because storage was very much costly. Now we really don't worry about it. For example, even virtual machines, when we started virtual machines, we used to allocate virtual machines some amount of hard disk, saying that I want to create this virtual machine which takes 10 GB of hard disk. We don't do it now. We say that whatever is available on my system, you can apply it to that. Same thing over here. So there is no hard cut limits, but you can still get the size because it is nothing but one folder on your system. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. అర్థం అవ్వలేదు నాకు. You have to explicitly delete them. If you delete the container, will the volume be deleted? The answer is no. You have to go into Docker volume and then delete the volumes, and then delete the volumes, because that's the whole point of having a volume, right? We don't want something to be deleted. Whatever is in the volume will not be deleted, but rest of all of your data will be lost, right? So one important command which I've discussed today is inspect, right? For whatever container which you have created, now you do inspect. For whatever image which you have created, use inspect. You will get a hell lot of data, where the image is stored, what are the different things inside that image, and all of that, right? Okay. So I don't think so I'll be able to complete the image layers concept in 4 minutes. Not happening. So what we will do is, anyway we have 3 hours of class tomorrow. So tomorrow our topics will be image layers, and then union file system, augmented union file system. All right, if you want, you can make a note and already have a look at that and come. And after that I'll be discussing about Docker networking. All right. So, and then possibly if we have some more time, okay, we'll try to look into what is this multi-host stuff. Okay, if I have to start 2 or 3 containers at one time, okay, so then how do I do it? Okay, and we'll be discussing about a older concept of using one Docker along with other Docker, which is called as linking. Now we don't use it. That was a very old way of using 2 containers. We have better networking now. So these are the areas which I'm going to cover tomorrow. And once we finish this, we'll be also discussing about some use cases which we'll be looking at, right? So the use cases are very simple. I'll have different technologies: one Java application, one Node.js application, and one in other technology, Angular or whatever it is, right? So 3 different applications. How are you going to build a image for that, right? And basically, how are you going to run it? What are the different ports? How do you do that? For example, I have done for game of life, right? What is that I have done? Game of life requires Tomcat to run, so that's why I've built the image using that. So if it is about other technology, how do you do that? So for that we will be looking at some other installation stuff and trying to build the image, right? Okay. And on Sunday, I think you have a class on one app server, right? So once you finish that class, okay, so then you can build a Docker container for whatever app server which you are learning. You will have that app server. Try to deploy a Java application there, because those are Java app servers. Whatever will be discussed are Java app servers. All right. So ఆ యాప్ సర్వర్ నాలెడ్జ్ వాడుకొని మీరు ఆ యాప్ సర్వర్ డాకర్ కంటైనర్ తీసుకొని ఈ గేమ్ ఆఫ్ లైఫ్ దాంట్లో కాపీ చేయండి. Right? Or any other war for that matter. I'm not worried. I'm not just saying game of life. So then you will come to know that not only Tomcat, I know one more app server. You can write that point in your resume. Okay. So you have containers for JBoss. JBoss is one more app server, much like Tomcat. Right. So you can use anything. It's really not what it is all about. Fine. So tomorrow we'll be discussing about very important aspect, which is called as union file system, a new kind of a file system which Docker uses. Okay, which has something in relation with our Docker run. Yesterday I said that whenever you use a run statement in your Docker file, right, you will be basically creating one image layer. So what are those image layers and how are they used? Fine. So that is what I'm going to start my tomorrow's class with. I'll stop it at that, because we are always exceeding our classes on containers and going low on cloud. I don't know that. Yesterday I had not looked at watch. I'm sorry for the people who had to wait till 8:50. Yeah. Okay then. So let me stop it at that, and we'll meet tomorrow. Tomorrow class is from 7:15 to 10, right? So that's what our class timings are. And for the people who have doubts in whatever you have discussed, I'll be here from 10 to 12. Let it be online, or let it be the people from here. Manikanta is not here. Yes, Manikanta. Tomorrow Qt Devops is our mail ID, right? So for the people in the online, we will be available in Hangout from 10 to 12. Okay, or 10:15 to 12, whatever it is. So if you have any questions on whatever you are discussing, anything, you can ask me. I'll be here. All right. Fine. Thanks.